Appreciate it. For those of you who don't know me, my name is Matthew Braun. I'm a senior grassroots protest coordinator with PETA. But 6 years ago, I was an undercover investigator with Last Chance for Animals. So a lot of what I'm going to be talking about today, I've seen firsthand. And what I will be talking about is what happens on factory farms. So we just heard Cassie say that DXE is calling for a moratorium or no new factory farms in California. And when we're talking to people about why we don't want to see any more factory farms, it might be easy to just say animals are like us, they feel pain, they have likes and dislikes, nobody should be hurt just for fleeting pleasure. But when we have the facts, we have the details about what's going on in these animals' lives and on these farms, we can be a little bit more convincing, whether we're talking to people on the street or we're talking to our friends and family, we're talking to legislators or talking to the press. So my goal today is to arm you with facts so that you can feel more confident when you're doing outreach, no matter who you're doing it to. There's a lot to cover, and you guys are already activists. So some of this is going to be stuff that you already know. Just real quick before we start, I wanted to give a content warning because I did try to use images that weren't graphic, but the descriptions that I'll be giving are common practices on factory farms, which may be unsettling. And it includes topics of sexual violence, extreme cruelty, and death. So, does everybody know what the term gestation means? Gestation is the duration of a pregnancy. For example, humans have a gestation period of 9 months. Do you know what the gestation period is for a pig? You can think about it in your head or put your answers in the chat, and I'll give you the answer at the end of this slide. So every aspect of pig farming happens in a windowless shed. The first time that pigs experience the outdoors is when they're on a truck bound for the slaughterhouse. On a tour of an industrial pig farm, I witnessed business as usual. These mother sows or pregnant sows kept in crates so small they can't turn around. And then and during my tour, I was told that I was lucky because I was there during breeding time. And what they did during breeding was they marched a boar, just one male, through an aisle. There were pigs in gestation crates on either side. And as the boar walked in front of a sow, the human workers would walk behind the sow and artificially inseminate them. These on many farms, the mother sows are kept in these gestation crates for the entirety of the gestation period. And they're only moved to a slightly bigger crate called a farrowing crate 1 week before they give birth. In the farrowing crate, it has a little more room. They're able to nurse their young, but they still can't turn around. And because space is so limited, it's not unheard of for a mother sow to crush a piglet beneath her weight. When newborn pigs are born into these industries, they have their teeth chopped off, or tails chopped off, and then their teeth are cut with pliers, and the males are castrated. And this is all done typically without any pain relievers or anesthetics. Piglets are separated from their mothers at about 21 days or 3 weeks. And at this point, they're put into crowded pens with other piglets of the same age. And these pens only get more crowded as the animals get bigger. It'll take about 6 months for the animals to reach what they call market weight. And then they are trucked to a slaughterhouse and killed. Usually they're gassed, and then they're hung upside down, and their throats are slit, and their bodies are dismembered so they could be marketed as food. If these animals were allowed to live their lives, they would get to be between 10 and 12 years old. But pigs raised in the on factory farms, and for food typically only live to be 6 months. So pigs gestate their young for 114 days. People who are familiar with pigs often refer to this as 3 months, 3 weeks, and 3 days. So now I want you to think about how old can cattle, cows and bulls, live to be? Again, you could put your answer in the chat or just think about it in your head. So first I want to talk about terminology, because cow is the term used for a female bovine who is pregnant or has given birth. This may sound like jargon that we don't need to know, but it risks damaging our credibility if we say something like male cows, because there is literally no such thing. Male bovines or bulls, or if they're castrated, they're called steer. So we don't want to call them male cows because it's a contradiction. And if we say something that is incorrect, we risk damaging not only our own personal credibility, but the credibility of our entire movement. Everything we say or everything they hear about animal rights from then on, they'll take with a grain of salt. So we want to be accurate because the truth is damaging as it is. So first, I want to talk about branding, where cattle raised on beef farms are branded with hot irons. You see in the top there. I tried to use pictures of the tools instead of pictures of the animals suffering from the tools, because like I said, we've all seen it. We're all in the movement already. So these brands cause 3rd-degree burns in the animal's skin, and they bellow in pain and they try to escape, often to no avail. Now I want to talk about dehorning, because for an embarrassingly long time, I didn't know that cows grew horns, that females grew horns. I thought that was just for the males, just for the bulls. So I wouldn't blame you all if you're just learning this for the first time. But the truth is, while there are some exceptions, in different breeds, most breeds of cattle, both males and females, grow horns. But we seldom see cattle with horns when we drive past a cattle ranch, because on most ranches, they're submitted to a painful process called dehorning or disbudding. And during this process, if they have horns, they're cut off. And if they don't yet, they are, the nerves in the horns are destroyed using cauterization. What you see in the bottom right of this slide is called a guillotine dehorner. This process is unregulated in the United States and is often performed without anesthetics. Cattle raised as beef are typically raised outdoors on a ranch, and after about a year of enduring harsh weather extremes, whether that could be blazing temperatures in the summer or sub-zero temperatures in the winter, depending on where the ranch is, the cattle are shipped to an auction where they're sold and then shipped to a massive feedlot. These feedlots are huge and they're filthy. It's filled with mud and feces, and the cows and cattle are crammed together by the thousands. Many are sick when they arrive, and some often die shortly after arriving at the feedlot. So when they reach market weight, it's typically after about 18 months of life. So a year on the ranch and about 6 months or so on the feedlot. They're taken to slaughter. Usually they're quote unquote stunned with a captive bolt gun, which fires a bolt into their skull. And then they're hung upside down, throats are slit, bodies are dismembered, packaged and sold as food. But if they were allowed to live their lives, these 18-month-olds would live to be 15 to 20 years. So calves on beef ranches do get to spend more time with their mothers than most animals raised to be eaten, but they're weaned. And to wean them, so they're not drinking their mother's milk, they use these weaners, which can be either rounded or spiked, as you see here. The spiked one is designed to cause discomfort if the calf does try to nurse from their mother. So the dairy industry has led generations of humans to believe that cows are always lactating. When we take time to think about what milk is in the biology of mammals, it's clear to us that just like anybody else, they only lactate for their young when they are pregnant or when they are nursing. But I went vegan on a bet. So I was vegan for several years and avoided the dairy industry for several years before I even realized that that cows had to be pregnant to be able to produce milk. So a female calf that has not been impregnated or given birth yet is called a heifer. And on a dairy farm, when a heifer turns 12 months old, she's artificially inseminated. At this point, she's considered a cow, and she'll gestate her young for about 9 months. And when her body starts to produce milk, she'll be attached to a milking machine. I went to a farm in Indiana that you guys might have heard of called Fair Oaks. And they give tours of the facility. And that was the first time I witnessed this carousel that you see on the left. I'm not sure what I expected, but they march the cows over, they'll connect one of them to the milking machine, and then it'll rotate to the next stall, and the next one will be connected. And then after they do one full rotation, they've vacuumed out all of the milk that they can get, and they'll typically go through this twice a day. Each cow will. So after she gives birth, she will almost immediately be artificially inseminated again. And this process will repeat itself 3 or 4 times before she's considered spent and sent to slaughter. Now I want to talk about the calves that are born into the dairy industry. So what do you think this image is on the right, on the top right? You could put your answer in the chat. So regardless of sex, the calves are immediately removed from their mothers to prevent them from drinking their mother's milk, which is the product that makes these farms exist. It's no secret that bull calves are typically sent to auction immediately because they don't produce milk and therefore are of no use to the dairy industry. To give a sense of how fast these dairy farms get rid of these calves, I've been to cattle auctions where they're auctioning calves, and many of them still have their umbilical cords attached to their bodies. The most likely buyers of bull calves is the veal industry. So large veal farms have typically done away with veal crates. In 2018, the American Veal Association confirmed that all of its members had transitioned to group housing for bull calves. Group housing is what you see in the left here. So these are the male calves. So in these situations, 5 calves are confined together in an 18 to 20 square foot pen, which certainly is bigger than a veal crate. But for reference, that's 5 calves that at the end of their lives will weigh up to 500 pounds each, all living in the amount of space where you might be able to fit a full-size mattress. Bull calves are raised as veal. They're slaughtered at about 16 to 18 weeks, or roughly 4 months old. This image in the top right is actually a replacement crate. So this is where the heifers or the female calves are raised for an entire year before their bodies reach maturity and they're artificially inseminated to replace their mothers on the dairy farm. So chickens are an animal that's really close to my heart. I spent 5 weeks in a chicken slaughterhouse in 2014. And 5 weeks is a really important number because that is the age that chickens typically are when they're sent to slaughter. So it's very likely that on my last night working in the slaughterhouse, I was hanging chickens who were born on my first day. So every night at the slaughterhouse where I worked, we hung over 100,000 chickens in shackles. On farms where chickens are raised as food, each chicken typically begins their life by having the ends of their beaks singed off with a hot blade. This is typically done without anesthetics. Then they're crammed tightly into windowless sheds by the tens or even hundreds of thousands. The meat industry does not keep chickens in cages. It's important to know. But that doesn't stop them from benefiting by using terms like cage-free when they market their products. Chickens raised as food have been bred to grow so big that their legs often buckle from the weight of their bodies. When this happens, the animal is not able to move, so they can't get access to food or water, and they'll often die of starvation or dehydration. The chickens who are lucky to survive the first 5 weeks of their life are carelessly picked up and literally thrown into cages to be transported to slaughter. A lot of chickens will die on the way to the slaughterhouse. The ride might take hours or even days. I remember one night when I was working at the slaughterhouse, we always put the dead on arrival birds into a dumpster. And one night in particular, we filled that dumpster twice, and then it was about half full at the end of the night. So let's give you a little idea of how many chickens arrive already dead. But if they are alive, they're hung upside down in shackles, and the shackle will take them out of the room. So the live hangers, the people who work in the live hang department, will shackle the animals, and they don't have time to think about what happens to these chickens when they leave the room, because each live hanger is hanging 2 birds every minute, right? No, sorry. 1 bird every 2 seconds, or 25 to 30 chickens every minute. Sorry. There's yeah. To give an example, 25 to 30 chickens every minute. They say that each vegetarian typically saves 27 chickens a year. So one vegetarian abstaining from eating chickens for a year saves 1 hanger, 1 minute of work at one slaughterhouse. That's why activism is so important. So when the chicken disappears from the live hang room, they're dunked into water that has an electric current running through it. This is supposed to stun them, but it doesn't always work, typically because the line is moving so fast. Then their bodies are dragged across a fixed rotating blade. In theory, this is supposed to slit their throats, but not all chickens are the same size. So chickens who are larger than the average chicken end up having their chests cut by this blade, whereas chickens who are smaller than the average chicken will have their faces sliced by this blade. And that's when the backup killer comes in. It's their job to manually slit the throats of all the chickens who were inadequately cut by the fixed blade, because the chickens are supposed to bleed out and die before they reach the tank where their feathers are removed. So it's like scalding hot water, which is supposed to remove their feathers. But often the backup killer will miss the chickens, or there's so many that they can't get to all of them. And chickens enter this vat of scalding hot water while they're alive and fully conscious. Chickens used for their eggs have been genetically manipulated to ovulate nearly 300 times per year. How many eggs do you think a chicken would normally lay if she hadn't been manipulated by genetics and her environment to maximize egg production? You can think about your answer in your head, or you can put it in the chat. A recent PETA investigation into a Walmart egg supplier revealed that hundreds of chickens used for their eggs died in cages after having a leg, a wing, or even their heads trapped in the wire mesh of the cages. This renders them unable to move, eat, and drink. Some were likely trampled by their cage mates, who likely had no place else to stand. And the eyewitness commonly found dead and rotting corpses of chickens living amongst the living. Regardless of whether chickens will be exploited, regardless of whether chickens who are exploited for their eggs are on farms with or without cages, life begins the same. When they hatch, chicks are sorted based on sex. Each year, hundreds of millions of males are crushed or drowned or suffocated or macerated, which is like ground alive, because males are no use to the egg industry. You can see on this example, it's pretty old, but it shows on the left the size of a chicken raised for their eggs, and on the right, the size of a chicken raised for their flesh after the same amount of time. Females immediately have their beaks singed off with a hot blade and their toes are clipped. They will be most likely be crammed into tiny cages and dark sheds. They'll be crammed so tightly that they're never able to spread their wings. On egg farms that use conventional cages, also known as battery cages, each bird is relegated to less than a standard sheet of paper. If the hens are being exploited for eggs on a cage-free or free-range farm, the cages are removed and the shed is just filled with chickens. It doesn't mean that they have any access. I mean, you guys know this. It doesn't mean that they have any access to the outdoors, just that there's an open window. And no cages. And laying an egg is an exhausting process and depletes a lot of nutrients from a chicken's body. But these chickens have been bred and manipulated to lay so many eggs that they have very little recovery time before the next egg. Chickens who are raised for their eggs are typically depopulated or killed after about 1 year because production of their eggs stops or lessens. And at this point, the industry thinks that it's more cost efficient to bring in a new hen than it is to let this hen live her life. Each year, approximately 300 million hens are killed by the egg industry, and these chickens would typically live to be 6 to 8 years, but they're killed after 1 or maybe 2. And the answer to how many eggs a chicken would normally lay is between 10 and 15. It's a far cry from 300. Obviously, there are many other animals killed for food, rabbits, turkeys, dogs, squirrels, cats, and just like with the animals that we discussed, their lives are frustrating and miserable, and their deaths are violent. Of course, fish are also animals, and they're often put into a category by themselves because they aren't measured in lives taken, but by weight. And whether they're caught by hook or by net, they experience fear and pain just as all animals do. And even this is not an exhaustive list, because beetles are used for their color, or used to color food. Castoreum is a natural flavor, quote unquote, that comes from the anal glands of beavers. Honey is bee vomit. Candies are made from gelatin, which is made by boiling skin and tendons and bones. I think I've seen Cassie do videos about all of these things. As we've recently seen with PETA Asia's investigation into Thailand, where monkeys are forced to pick coconuts, the use of animals the abuse of animals for food can show up in unlikely places. And then just to give you a visual of the lifespan of these animals. It costs money to keep animals alive. So Big Ag has genetically manipulated many of the most commonly abused species to reach physical maturity long before nature ever intended. So I'll give you a minute to look at that, but 5 weeks, a chicken only gets to live for 5 weeks, roughly 40 days. That's nuts. Ugh. And then here we have very conservative estimates of how many of each species are killed each year. So more than 30 million cows suffer and die in the meat and dairy industries. Approximately 8 billion chickens are killed for their flesh. Another 305 million are used for eggs. And then of the over 100 million pigs who die every year as food, more than 1 million of them die annually just during transport to the slaughterhouse. Cassie talked about turkeys. She said that 46 million of them will be killed for Thanksgiving alone, and another 22 million will die just for Christmas dinner. And then I wanted to bring your attention to these gigantic numbers over here, because more fish are killed for food each year than any other animal, than all the other animals combined. Tens of billions of fish and shellfish are slaughtered annually. Okay, this is my last slide, and I just wanted to reiterate that what we say to people is important. We want to have the facts, and we want to be seen as credible. We want to be seen as experts in our field. But if somebody asks us a question that we don't know the answer to, it's important to say we don't know. This can actually be a fantastic opportunity, because we can say, hey, you know what? I'm not sure about the answer to that question. If you give me your email address, I'll look it up and I'll let you know when I find out. And then this will establish communication between you and the other person so they can reach out with more questions. And then Cassie also mentioned that when we talk to people who work in these industries appropriately, we can save lives. So it's important to, I mean, you guys are DXC, you know this, but it's important to direct our aggression and our frustration with the system and not the people who work in the system. You know, PETA has rescued a couple dozen animals this year just by negotiating their release. And I saw that DXC is rescuing some turkeys in the same way. So I wanted to reiterate that. And then just thank you so much for spending your Saturday morning with me. I know this was a lot of heavy information and it was delivered in a very short period of time, but please try to retain at least some of the facts